Hello and welcome to the Learn How to See Better podcast, the only podcast out there known to actually improve your vision the longer you listen. This is your host, Drew Davis, and I'm glad you've joined me here today. I can't wait to share some great information with you about how to improve your health, wealth, and relationships. So let's get right down to it, shall we? Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Drew Davis, your host of the Learn How to See Better podcast, and I want to welcome you back to this listening session today because I've got something good for you today that I want to share, and it might sound a little tricky off the top when you first hear it, but I do want you to understand why I prefer difficulty, and hopefully by the end of what I have to share, you'll maybe see things a little bit better and have an understanding of why you should maybe consider a preference of difficulty as well. And we'll just cut straight to the chase here. What it has to do with is the preference to difficulty is tied to the ability to get delayed gratification. I'll sum it up like this. If you're willing to elect doing something difficult now, the things that we do now that are hard and seem difficult, they translate into ease in life later. But similarly, if we want to take the easy road now, things are going to be hard later. And it's just one of those kind of facts of life, one of those forces of nature, so to speak, no different than the law of gravity. And I've seen it in just numerous instances in my own world, as well as that of others. And I mean, it covers every area from education to health, to knowledge, to growth, to relationships. And I'll just cover a couple of different scenarios, even thinking way back to when I was just a young lad in high school. If you've tuned in for a while, you know a little bit about my background and how I was, challenged to figure out what I wanted to be when I grow up, right? And I remember my logic at a young age was like, hey, I want to be rich when I grow up. So, what major do I need to pick, right? How silly is that, figuring that you just pick a major and you all of a sudden go and pursue a profession and that's just going to make you rich. So whether or not it was, a crazy harebrained idea for me to want to be rich or not, the fact of the matter was, as a senior in high school, again, I'd had, some of those first summer jobs where I got a chance to make money and didn't really have the expenses since I was living at home. So I just felt what that income was like, and I enjoyed having some of that. And I do remember back in my senior year, I was looking to take the easy road because that mentality of maybe hanging with the cool kids too much and we get our feet, kicked up. It's like, oh, high school, such a journey. I even remember the logic being, I've tried and put forth so much effort during my high school career. Senior year is the year to kind of kick back. And as a result of that flawed philosophy, I remember I was scheduled to be taking AP Calculus as a senior, and I was thinking, no way, that's going to make life difficult. I'm trying to get out at half days or 3/4 days if they had options back then. And I actually, embarrassingly enough, did something kind of sneaky. I remembered, I remembered waiting until my dad was out of town and trying to sweet talk my mom to get her to sign this form that would let me drop the class. And I don't know what kind of wool I pulled over her eyes to get her to believe me that I needed to drop this class. But I chose to drop AP Calculus. Now, I was really good at math. I've always been, the math and science type. And so just the fact that I was scheduled to be taking advanced placement calculus, which is, mathematics of change, pretty fancy stuff for, 16, 17-year-old kid. But little did I know or put together that I had selected this major of engineering because I wanted to be rich and that was the ticket, right? So if you aren't aware, most engineers rely heavily on math and particularly advanced math. I mean, I'm talking math so advanced that there's more letters than numbers. And here I go dropping AP Calculus and I go try and get into engineering, and now it's been a year since I'd taken math, and I had to take some college placement exam. I was super rusty, didn't test well, and they wanted to stick me in college algebra and trigonometry that I had to kind of get through as these, remedial courses just to get to a point where I could make college credits that would apply to my major. And it just ended up being so math intensive. I remember I was taking 2 math classes in one semester, and all of a sudden math wasn't so easy. And this was even algebra. They'd found a way to make it more difficult. I'm thinking, my goodness, if I would have just stayed in the tough math back when I was at that high school level, all of this stuff would have been so easy for me. And then when I finally did get to calculus, these were such new concepts that I had been a couple of years removed from. And I remembered I just constantly struggled. And finally, when I did get to the the top level math course in the engineering curricular, where you're getting into all sorts of, advanced calculations, multivariable calculus, Fourier transforms and the like, it was one of those things that had my head spinning, and I got through it. But boy, did I choose the hard road when I could have just kept pumping the well and then just been, maybe not on easy street, but I wouldn't have had to take a math course over again. I think, as a matter of fact, looking back, I had to retake 2 math courses because, one was more for a GPA enhancement perspective, and one of them was, I just got behind the 8 ball, and this was just too difficult, and it was too heavy for me at the time, and I had to revisit some of those concepts. So it was just, one of those unfortunate things. I think, one, I had to take a course more than once, and one of them was in summer school. So try that on for size, when one little semester or 2 in high school, translated to multiple math courses I had to take, and in some instances retake, just because I took the easy road. And when you look at academics and say, well, what does that matter? That's just, if you're trying to be, if you're trying to really be a climber. But, I saw the exact same thing with this almost, I guess, lazy mentality a little bit, with that senioritis, call it that. But it was similar in my wrestling season, my senior year. I was captain of the wrestling team. We'd had some changes in the coaches. I didn't really, at the time, get along with one of them. And I was just kind of salty about starting the year, just not really looking forward to it. I don't even think I came to the, first practice or something like that. I don't remember all the details, but I do remember the fact that I was dragging my feet at the start of the season and just wasn't really all the way with my head in the game, because I wasn't sure if I was going to wrestle that year. Again, more head trash I was dealing with. But that slow season start, dragging my feet to start the season, kind of loafing it through practice and not really pouring it on early to get myself in optimal shape, really started to work against me, because I ended up having a struggle to the start of my senior year with regards to losing matches I should have won, being beat because I was out of shape. It was just ridiculous. And I knew that I was a better wrestler, even though I kind of felt stuck and was just like, what am I doing here? This is ridiculous. It's embarrassing. Reputation, big man on campus, all that sort of thing. And finally, over that Christmas break, I remember that it was like something clicked, and I was finally able to really dig my heels and make the decision that I was going to push myself and demonstrate what I am actually capable of. And as luck would have it, I really just kind of got laser focused and just turned it up. And the next thing I knew, I came into the spring season, and there was, no doubting that anybody in my way was just going to get taken out. And I remember having just a phenomenal second half of my wrestling season, and even into the state tournament did very well. Right up until the end, after I'd won some matches and was wrestling to compete for one of the final spots on the podium and place, but I was unsuccessful in that. And the thing I remember most significantly about that experience was this: when I got beat in overtime and I just didn't have enough gas to go, and the guy had a little bit more in him, I couldn't even give myself the luxury of crying my eyes out, because I'd left it all out on the mat. But one thing I can recall was all those practices that I skimped out and skated by, given not my very best. And I remember, gosh, if things were, if I wouldn't have taken it so easy then, it wouldn't be so hard now. And it's one of those arenas where I really got to learn that lesson. I learned that lesson pretty abruptly, simply because of the fact that I had the opportunity to make life easier, but I chose to just, mess around and not really take it serious. And the difficulty really reared its head when the time came for me to perform in the final hour. And I realized that some of those early decisions were poor decisions. And had I stuck with it, that I would have been much better positioned to have some of that success that I wanted to close out my high school wrestling career with. And so those are just two examples that I could think of from when I was young. One from academics, one from athletics. But I mean, the same, I think, really goes on the other side of the coin, where I wasn't messing around as a slacker. And I remember another time when I was in corporate America, being tagged as a product specialist for a particular, high-tech software that the company was selling. And this thing was, a quite complex, complicated type of tool. And I remembered being one of the individuals tasked with developing deep expertise. And I remember thinking, I could probably be one of the top 10 resources in the nation if I really gave this some focus. And for multiple reasons, that's what I did. And I ended up being titled with the subject matter expert, label for this particular product. But it was so easy then to go in and have discussions with customers, whether it was a technical discussion or a sales discussion, because I was so comfortable having fully immersed myself in understanding how that software operated and the value that it brought to businesses. I could easily share that with client prospects and help them understand the integrations from a technical side and what the procurement and the implementation service would actually look like. And so that was one example in my career where I took the exact opposite approach. It was hard to learn this technology. It was clunky. There were hiccups. There were bugs that I had to deal with. But I stayed focused on making sure that I was one of the best at that, because that's what was important to me at that point in my career. And similarly, when it comes into the subject of education, even post corporate, I've been continuing to invest in my education for over a decade now. And, when I even recently did the numbers, it was a remarkably large number in my opinion, to think, wow, what an investment in my education. And although these things have seemed hard throughout the years, when I look at them from when you go and, purchase some sort of access to a package or coaching or what have you, that the concepts seem difficult, but then you realize they're not necessarily difficult. They're just new. And if you will continue to try and tackle them one by one and take a look at how you can absorb this information and then, kind of activate any associated, steps that are required to really cement that knowledge. Since I've been so proactive with challenging myself and taking on the hard now part, I've really been able to receive on the easy later part, because now when I go to look and learn advanced investing strategies, I have the luxury of all my background knowledge that it builds upon. And that makes it so much easier to advance into the higher levels, to do more advanced deals, because the compound effect has taken care of me and really treated me well for my discipline. A couple other examples I can think of, and this is just really to drive the point home of why I prefer difficulty. And I'm hoping that many of you have similar examples that you can think of, instances in your life, whether it was younger in your life, whether it was in your current age, whether it was in health and academics. I mean, I think it continues to go on. One of the things I think about now that I'm so fortunate for is my health and happiness as a 40-year-old adult male. I mean, when I first started dating, my now wife, then girlfriend, we would have, quote unquote, knockdown, drag out fights, nothing physical, just, figuratively speaking. But, she's a spicy redhead and can be pretty quick-witted. And there'd be a lot of instances when we were younger where we could really go at it in an argument. And it was almost like we were working out the kinks and some of those difficult stages of dating, when it's like, this person's really getting on my nerves. Is this worth it, right? You just kind of work through some of those growing pains, and the effort we put into making our relationship work early on, I think, has been the secret sauce, or at least a good portion of the secret sauce to why we have so much happiness now and so, little to zero friction in our marriage currently because we've worked out the kinks. We're a smooth, well-oiled running machine. And, any kind of disappointment or disagreement or conflict can easily be addressed through simple communication. And that's such a beautiful thing. Even when I've looked at some of the things where we can be more reluctant in the ways of our thinking, I'm fit at 40 right now because by no mistake. I was raised in the South and I've loved eating some of that good old home cooked Southern hospitality meals and cooking. But, what's happened over time is I've had my own journey of awakening with regards to food and nutrition and have since adopted a ketogenic lifestyle. And, most people will ask me when we're talking about, fitness or fuel for the body, being nutrition and the nutrients that we eat. And they say, well, gosh, isn't that so hard? Isn't that so difficult? You can't eat all these sweets. Oh my goodness, boo-hoo-hoo. Don't you get bored of it? And I just kind of chuckle. It's like, you think about the fact that, most people, quit the diets that they're on because they don't love what they're really doing. When you find something that you enjoy and you love, and you find that there's a whole abundance of delicious and healthy foods that one can eat, you realize it's not restricted. And so what seems hard, if you're trying to break a sugar addiction, that's going to seem hard. But if you're able to get past that, you'll find that the transition over to a different method of fueling your body is just going to be so much easier. At least that's been my experience as I've transitioned the way that I eat and fuel my body. And so it's just, another, kind of cherry on top, no pun intended, of another beautiful example of how you can make that choice. Easy now translates to hard later. If you're willing to do what's hard later, it's hard now, it'll translate to what's easy later. And I think that's one of those things that people don't recognize because it does seem kind of backward. It really does, doesn't it? But, again, what I've seen in real life is that it just goes to show that the people who are willing to do what others won't will someday have what others can't. And you see it all around, right? Go to the gym. The guy that's the gym rat in there with the body that everyone wants is also the one that's willing to put in the extra hours that no one else will. So, it's kind of tough for people to actually, with a straight face, once they have this information, go out there and knock somebody else who's doing something grandiose or amazing, because the fact of the matter is it only looks easy to them now because it's there later. The guy driving the Ferrari down the PCH at 10:30 in the morning on a Tuesday and doesn't look like you have a care in the world or a place to go. He's the guy that was burning the midnight oil early on before he built his large business to be able to have all the luxury, free time, toys, and freedom that we might become awestruck to see in the middle of the day. So that's a little bit more about why I prefer difficulty, and I would strongly recommend and encourage anyone out there who is looking at something that they're trying to pursue in their life with regards to goals or long-range vision, just to think about it. And as my mentor Jim Rohn said once, you're either going to pay the price of discipline or the price of regret. And discipline weighs ounces, but regret weighs tons. So hopefully that will weigh on your mind a little bit and give you an understanding of why I prefer difficulty. So at some point you're going to have to pay that price anyway. So I would recommend that we actually look at, if you want to condense and collapse the time frame to reaching your goal, go for what's hard now. Go for what's harder now, because it'll at least be easier later than as opposed to taking the easy road now and finding yourself stuck in difficulty that you might not be able to overcome in the journey and quest to reach your goals. So with that, as always, feel free to share this, tag somebody, subscribe, download it, let the world know you found some goodies, and I will look forward to speaking and meeting with you again on a future episode of Learn How to See Better. Thanks, everyone.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.